Behind the Shades.
Yeah, I'm Trinity. I'm from a rural, small town, northern Alberta, way north. Nobody usually knows where we're from. And I grew up in this area. I was one of the very fortunate kids that grew up with a very financially observant mom. And she taught me a lot about financials, budgeting, managing my money as a teenager. And that led me into wanting to help other people do that, because where I'm from, there's a lot of oil money. Alberta is huge on two things. It's farming and oil. And so what a lot of people would do after we graduated, they go off to work in the oil field, and they'd come back, they'd have big trucks, they'd have awesome toys like sleds and quads and bikes, and they'd have nothing in the bank, and they'd be poor, and they'd have to go make some more money for the next month. And I wanted to help people get out of that rat race, enjoy what they do, make that money in the oil field if that's what they wanted to do, but actually save it. And I was really ideological in that I can save the world, just me working at a bank. And I was in the banking industry for, oh my goodness, 8 years. I've been in the finance industry now for 11. And I realized that while banks have their places, unfortunately, they don't educate their staff enough to really give a full comprehensive to really do too much for their clients. They can help in one way, shape, or form. They can't do a full comprehensive review or restructuring of their clients' financials. And so I went independent, and that's what I do now. I am an independent financial broker. I work with like 50 of Canada's top financial companies, from investments to insurances to mortgages to consumer proposals and bankruptcy agencies to car dealerships that aren't actually the dealerships, they're just the loans that are much better than your traditional stealing loans. I hate to say that, that's my own personal opinion. And so what I do is I help families find a way to live their dreams again. So we've lost that ability to dream. You know, when you were younger, and this is probably cliche to say, but when you were younger, everybody would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you'd say astronaut or cowboy or singer or fill in the blank. And nobody told you that you can't do it, or if they did, was few and far between. Now, however, if you're 18 and you say, I want to be an astronaut, what are you told? Well, that's not realistic. Choose a backup. What's not realistic? What if you could actually achieve those dreams? What if you could put your money where your mouth was, with a plan that fits your, what's affordable to you, and with a plan that actually gets you to a place where you're not just surviving in the 9 to 5 or the shift work, but you're thriving in your dream life. You know, whether that dream life is I want to take 3 vacations a year, or for me, I have big dreams and I want to completely fund a vet clinic for emergency medical procedures for animals and spay and neuters. All of them I want to be able to pay for. That's expensive. I have big money dreams. So what am I going to do to get there? Well, I already have a financial plan built and in place to do that. Maybe your dream is just to be able to go on 2 or 3 vacations a year. Whatever that dream is to you, we want to help you get there. And we start with step 1. We do what's affordable, what means the most to you. And that's what I do. I make dreams realistic by helping you with your finances. Really, it's a long answer.
And that's a beautiful answer, because I think that's what the expectation of financial advisors was, right? I remember before I got experience with finances and things of that nature, I wasn't taught how to cash a check. I didn't taught about the importance of investing and things along that nature, because unfortunately it's not taught in school. It's something you kind of have to pick up, right? So for you, Trinity, what are some of the roadblocks that you see in the clients that you deal with that is preventing them from, one, understanding finances better, and two, reaching the type of dream that you so you eloquently articulated?
That's a very heavy question because I could go on and on about the answers.
Go on and on like Erica Badu, please.
So to answer the first part, the lack of education, right? We don't know where we can go to trust our education. There's a lot of very smart, very successful people giving financial education now on our social media devices, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, and whatnot. And that's great. But there's also some people who don't know what they're talking about, or who just hit it big this one time on social media. And for somebody who doesn't have the experience in the financial industry, it can be difficult to tell the difference. They can be like, oh, well, so and so told me, and I'm not hating on this investment type. Somebody told me to put all of my money in cryptocurrency, and I lost it all the next day. There's so many different types of investments that are good for different purposes, and there's no one investment that somebody should only invest in. When you have the proper education provided to you, you have the proper people talking to you. They talk to you about diversity, about having your money in different pots. It's not keeping all of your eggs in one basket. So that's essential. You can't just put all of your money into gold, all of your money into crypto, and not lose anything or not get the returns that you wanted. Like that the fluctuations are going to be outside of what you expect in the returns. So it's the lack of financial education. And unfortunately, my experience, I'm not going to talk about the industry as a whole because obviously I can only speak to my own experiences. In the 8 years that I was working in the banks, I was promoted, 5 times. Actually, coincidentally, I was also in 5 different locations for just the one bank. And I was only taught how to sell our bank's products. I remember this one client very specifically in my last year at the bank. And he had come in, sat down, and he was like, I need a consolidation loan. I can't handle all these payments. I need to put them all together. I'm drowning in this debt. And I specifically remember this because I didn't actually give him a loan, even though we applied for it. He didn't actually take the loan, because what we did is we sat down, and what happens when you sit with an advisor is they go through your stuff. They go, okay, what are your assets? What are the things you own? What are the things you owe on? What are your debts? And what's that ratio? So what are your payments every month in comparison to the money you bring in? And there's a specific threshold that bankers and loan officers look for. And he was way under, like he was doing really good. He was making, I believe, because this was several years ago now, I believe he was bringing in about between $10,000 and $12,000 a month after taxes. And he didn't have enough money to pay for payments that were only a couple $100s for some reason. Now, he did have a lot of kids. He had, and this is where I also can't remember exactly, but he either had 4 or 6 kids. I think it was 6 because he had a giant family. I remember thinking, holy, that's giant. And then, so we technically put the application through. I sent it in. But then after he left, I had some free time. And I went through the last 3 months of his banking. And you'll never believe how much money he was spending on eating, food, groceries, eating out per month. It was $6,000 Canadian, spending just so much money. And when I went through it, I had printed out all of his paperwork because I'm a very pen and paper person. Printed out all of his statements, was highlighting and like categorizing and color coding. And he was spending a ton of money eating out, which is where a lot of this came from. And so I gave him a call and I said, hey, I don't have your loan back yet, but why don't we get together and sit down? I found another option that we could do potentially. When can you and your wife come in? So he came in, and by the time he came in, the loan was back, the loan was approved, no big deal. So we had a backup should he reject my first idea. But I sat him down and I showed him his statements, and I showed him where I added up all of his eating out and all of his groceries and the like, and then the total at the end for the last 3 months. I showed him this and I was like, how attached are you to eating out this often? Because this is a lot. I understand you're a family of 8, but I grew up knowing, like, I have a family that's a family of 6. They have 4 kids. They don't spend nearly that amount of money. Not even close. I was like, how attached are you to eating out? Like, this is what's going on. Once he saw that, he was speechless. He looked like he had been slapped. But the thing is, this was his second consumer proposal. This was his second consolidation loan. Another advisor has sat down with him, did this loan up, got his debt down, and he racked it back up again because they didn't fix the actual problem. And that's the issue, is we don't fix the actual problem. We fix the symptoms in the banks. So what I did is I went and I fixed the problem. I said, look, this is where your issue is. So he decided to cut back on his eating out and cook more at home. He cut it in half. So instead of spending $6,000, he spent $3,000, which in my personal opinion is still way too much for a family of 8 in our area. Like, still double what I personally feel they should be spending, but he still cut it in half. He had an extra $3,000 every single month to put towards his debts. And that's what he did. 3 months later, I give him a call, and I had checked out his stuff, what his progress was like, paying off the debts that he had with us. I couldn't obviously see what he was doing with the outside debts that weren't with my bank. And I congratulated him because he was almost paid off. He had over $20,000 in total. And with the stuff he held with our bank, he was almost paid off in 3 months after cutting his eating out in half. Well, his total food bill for the month in half. I think it was 2 months later. I don't think it was a complete 3 months later. He called me and he said, I'm completely paid off. How can I make sure to never get in this again? And so we came in, we set up a full like investments and savings, and like we figured out a plan for him. When my boss saw that I had a loan that was approved on the system, and I had told him that we decided to just budget instead, I spent the time to help this guy budget, or to at least see how much he was spending. It was not looked at very kindly. A typical consolidation loan doesn't make the bank a whole lot of money. So it wasn't like, oh, here's a mortgage worth hundreds of thousands of dollars versus, it was only going to give the bank, I think in total, $5,000 or $6,000 in interest, which seems like a lot. And it's a lot for you to pay, but on the bank side of things, that's not really a lot in revenue. But he was not happy. I was supposed to have given this guy a loan. Instead, this guy got debt free in like 5 or 6 months, and he didn't have to pay that much interest. And I was not congratulated for it. I was not congratulated for helping this client actually gain freedom in his life, actually start going towards his goals. The first question out of their mouth when I told them, hey, he's paid off, is, great, have you sold him some investments? So that's where the disconnect lies on the financial education part. And that's also why we don't dream, is because we're taking advice, but from people who are so, I don't want to say closed-minded or narrow-minded, but they're focused on the short term. The bankers are focused on making their numbers, making their quotas for the quarter. their bosses are focused on making money for the year for their branch to keep them open, which is totally, it's business. That's what it is. It's business. It's not necessarily evil. It's business. But we're also told, going back to what we were talking about before, Train, is how often are you told to pick something, a dream that's more realistic? Pick a backup. So one, we're not given the financial education that we need. In high school, in college, I had to go to my second year of college to get a personal finance course that taught me what a checkings account was, which is ridiculous. I was like, I already know this. I've been in the bank for 3 years. And two, nobody encourages us to dream. Everybody plays it safe because we're so used to chasing security and stability instead of taking a smidgen of risk, even if it's only a little bit, and trusting ourselves, putting the faith in ourselves that we can do a little more. Because that's where it falls, is we don't trust ourselves to make it happen, because just go to work. There's the paycheck, there's the job. They'll give you your benefits. Here's how much we're willing to pay you to give up on your dreams. That's where my problem lies. And I could go on forever about this, but
What you're saying is something that I experienced myself, because I had no idea about finances up until I decided to look into it myself. And as I got older with age, I understood why it's not in school. And for those who are listening, this is going to sound very dark, very sad, but the world needs a class of people that do not know how to obtain financial understanding or freedom. They're going to be, unfortunately, the bottom of the middle class or the working class, or they're going to be the lower class citizens, meaning that no matter what happens to them, they're going to go to work, shut up, earn their money, and continue. A lot of our grandparents were that way, right? A lot of people who worked long hours, who said that you don't leave this company no matter what. 40 years, 50 years, you get your pension, you go, and then when you have children, they know who you are. Like, oh, aren't you the son? Aren't you the daughter of Terrain? Yeah, he spent 50 years here. Do you want a job? And the cycle continues. And I think a lot of times, if everyone were to have the knowledge that maybe I have, or that definitely Trinity is looking to share with each and every one of you, you'd be better off and you'd make wiser decisions, because there's a lot of power in your dollar. There's a lot of power in understanding where that dollar can take you. And for you, Trinity, when you're working with your clients, how important is it for you to make them understand that, one, they have the power to change their situation, and two, you can help them get the abilities to do so?
So it's extremely important, because here's the thing. I could build you, let's say Terrain, you and I sit down, I could build you a full comprehensive plan that helps you get to where you want to go. It's within your budget. It doesn't scare the living poop out of you. I mean, might make you nervous because you're like, oh my gosh, this is happening, but it's not terrifying. I could do all of that. But if you don't believe that it's going to work, if you don't believe and understand, at least at a high level, how it's going to help you and what we're doing, and it's part in the plan, how likely is it that you're going to stick to it? We can set up a ton of automations to make it just a set it and forget it, which me personally, I know I need. So many of my clients need it. And I know for you and your listeners and all of you that are listening, you probably know somebody, that multiple somebodies that needs a set it and forget it plan, because not everybody likes to be fully involved all day, every day. If we were fully involved in absolutely every aspect of our lives, we would be completely overwhelmed. It would just be way too much, because like that's that's the whole point behind things like HelloFresh and automatic investments. Like they just automatically do it. They take something off your plate. That's why companies have auto ships. Hey, we're going to send you 1 month's worth of X product. In a month, we're going to bill you and ship you another product so that you don't have to think about it. And it just makes your life easier so that you can focus on the things that matter. Do people get you and you just keep paying for something that maybe you don't use? Yes. So we need to be conscious of that fact. But there is a benefit in it. And so when you build a full comprehensive financial plan, it is super important to understand and to be aware of your own abilities. And to build a plan around that. It is super important to be educated and to ask your advisor so many questions, and every question that you have, because if you're not 100% confident in the plan that you guys have put together, again, you're not going to keep it. And for me, for someone like me who's not on salary, I need to make sure that I keep my clients for a long time, because that takes a lot of work to get new clients. And I would prefer to build relationships with them and help them throughout their lifetime. And the only way that I can do that is making sure that they stick around long term, by making sure that they understand and their needs are met and their wants are met and they feel valued, they feel heard, and they understand what's going on. And so to answer your question, that it's so incredibly important. It's the only way to do business, in my personal opinion. You can no longer be that car salesman that's just going and making sales, or go door to door and make sales and have no relationship with the people that you're with. You have to have a holistic, full, comprehensive view of what your clients are looking for. And that includes, me involving the kids in it, because unlike, 50, 60 years ago, companies today will replace you. Well, companies back then would replace you and no problem, would replace your dad and no worries. But back then there was a lot more loyalty going both ways, from employer to employee, and vice versa. And today it's just not the case. And speaking from my own experience. So the moment that I left the company, I was practically shunned by everybody who worked there. So it's so important that things change and we do things the way we need to today.
I like that you highlighted your experiences, Trinity, as well as when you're sharing this information with people, because as we both discussed, it's not something that's readily available, and it's not something that you can easily obtain. A lot of times we have to go through it to understand it, right? It's like that first heartbreak. Oh, I don't know if this is going to work for me, but then you learn from it and you find the person of your dreams.
Yeah.
Many of us have to fall flat and be like, oh, I have this debt, I can't pay it off. I don't understand the interest rate on this credit card. Why am I not approved? I make so much money. It's something that we have to kind of pull from the experiences of maybe people that we know, or people that we heard about, or more importantly, from ourselves. So for you, when I look at you and you're sharing all these wisdom to your clients, what's some of the ways that you prepare them to make sure that they're financially sound today as well as going into the future?
It's very simple, actually. It's, first off, you get to know your client. You can't prepare for something if you don't know where you're going. So for example, I'm going to Vegas next week. I would have no idea what to pack if I had no idea where I was going. You have to have an end goal. If you're going to Alaska, you're going to pack for a very different climate than going to Vegas. So it's the same thing when it comes to finances. You have to know where you're going in order to build a plan. So we get to know the client first and foremost. We get to know what their dreams are and all that encompasses. We get to know their family and what's important to them, and really be able to build a full plan. So just want to gather my thoughts here before I go and word vomit over everything and overwhelm you guys. What I do is we look at, we look at your full dreams. We figure out, what are your finances? What are they at currently? We look at everything. And then from there, in turn, any option that I provide to my clients, because what happens is I with the dreams and what they currently have, then we go in and we build a plan. I shop the market, I build a plan. And I give them options. And I say, look, we have option A and option B. Here's the pros and cons for each. Here's how it's going to affect you. Because you could say, you know, I'm going to buy whatever it is for, I'm going to buy a car for $70,000 with an interest rate of 6% and over 6 years. Okay, but do you actually know how that's going to affect you? Do you know how much money you're actually going to be paying? No, like you just hear numbers, you don't have what that means to you. So I go, here's option 1, here's option 2. What you're really going to see is here's the prices for option 1 and 2. Depending on what we do, whether it's how much you're investing or how much you're, whatever the case might be. Here's how much I'm going to have to put towards this plan a month to pay off my debt or whatever the case may be. But you're not going to register what that means for you. So that's where we go and we go, look, option 1 is going to do this. Here's how it's going to impact your family. Here's what you're going to be able to do. Here's how long it's going to take to get to where you want to go. Here's option 2. Here's all the same information for option 2. And then with that knowledge, we can narrow it down. And based on what you tell me, for example, if you and I sit together, based on what you tell me and what you have already told me your priorities are, I can go, do you want my recommendation? Which, I mean, you don't go to the doctor and not want a recommendation. I mean, most people don't. So that's what I'm here for. This is what I recommend. Based on what we have talked about, A, B, and C, this is the plan that I'd recommend for you. This is going to benefit your budget and your life better. We can always, like if it's the lower of the two options, the slower, the less aggressive option, which is normally the case where we go, because a lot of the times we're starting something brand new and you don't want to you don't want to shock your budget, because you're most like that's when you're more likely to cancel and stop your plan, is when you're shocking your bank account and your budget and you're like, oh my gosh, and it's just not good. So usually we start small, not all the time, but usually we start small and we go, all right, let's do this. Here's how we can convert it and upgrade to the larger one when you're ready, when your budget allows, or when you're used to it and you're comfortable, whatever the case might be. Like you might be able to fully afford the larger one, putting more towards your debts or whatever we're putting your money towards. You might be able to afford it, no problem. But it's that you have to be mentally prepared for it too. So that's how I really prepare my clients. And then it's regular touch bases. You know, depending on the client, what they're doing, if they didn't have a full money makeover, you know, we might connect about finances once a year. Connect, you know, more than that to maintain the relationship, see how everything's going on the personal side. We want to maintain the relationship. We want our clients to make sure that they know they can come to us and they're not just a number to us, because I don't need 1,000 clients like I did in the bank to, you know, make myself a living. And what's great is I don't need clients to pay me either. So what I do for my clients is free. So that's how it's. Does that answer your question? I feel like I rambled and I did. I believe that answered it. Yeah.
It does. It does. And it allows me to segue into the fact that, or into another topic where you're helping people with their relationship with money. Do you also help them with how money impacts their relationships?
Absolutely. So, okay. So the leading cause, or it's not necessarily the leading cause, when you look at the stats, 59% of divorces have a money aspect as part of the reason. That's huge. And depending on the statistic you look at, between 20 and 40%, I know that's a large variance, but it's a good chunk even if it's only 20%. Between 20 and 40% of divorces are a direct result of finances. It's not just finances are a part of this divorce. It's a direct result of it. So the money in relationships is huge. We don't have a lot of people willing to open up about it at this time because it is such a stigma. But for the couples that are willing to open up about it, it can be so freeing for them because, well, you don't know what you don't know, right? And for couples, they might see that there's only one way and go, I don't like that way, so I'm going to do the exact opposite. There's no middle ground. And yet that exact opposite isn't working. So what I see usually is 3 different ways, well, 2 different ways plus a combination of managing money. You know, our grandparents, most of our grandparents probably had or have completely joint accounts. Nothing is separate, 100% joint. And that's absolutely great. If you are trusting or with a partner that you trust, or at least communicating with your partner. You guys could be completely different money identity wise. I don't want to say the word identity, but with how you relate to money. But as long as you're communicating, that way can work. The other end is, you know, your money is completely separate, right? And again, that's the exact opposite. That's where a lot of people go, but then they forget that they need to communicate, and that's where the negative comes in. They forget that they need to communicate, and then problems arise. Like, for example, what I see there most often is when 2 people come together and they're like, all right, it's time to share expenses. So let's say they move in together, for example. It's time to share finances. How are we going to do this? And we've got a person who makes, you know, I'm just going to use large numbers for easy math. We've got one person who makes $10,000 a month and the other person who makes $5,000 a month. Okay. And you're like, you know what? We're going to split our expenses 50-50. Well, what if your expenses are $5,000 a month to live? So if you're splitting the expenses 50-50, that's $2,500 each. So person A, usually the man, you know, let's say that's the person that makes $10,000. They only have to pay $2,500 in expenses. Like, that leaves them with $7,500 to, if their accounts are completely separate, or not completely separate, but their personal expenses are completely separate. To $7,500 to play, to invest in his or her future, to do whatever they want with it, buy a fancy car, whatever. They have $7,500 to play with every month. And then the person with the lower income has $2,500 because they only make $5,000. So you have one partner living it up, having $7,500 in disposable income that they can choose whatever they want to do. And the lower partner has $2,500 to a car, whatever the case might be, whatever they want to spend it on. That's 3 times the amount of the lower person. And that's not fair. If you're in a relationship, you shouldn't have to quote unquote pay rent and one person thrive while the other person struggles and budgets and pulls money together. That's not a relationship. That's obviously my opinion, but I'm very happy and okay saying it. That's not a relationship. That's roommates. That's what that is. It's roommates. And if you guys have intimate relations, you're roommates that sleep together. Like, that's how I see it. What I always recommend, and what me and my colleagues always recommend. All right, the person makes $10,000, the other person makes $5,000, so it's $15,000 coming into the house every month. So one person makes 66% of the money, the other person makes 33%. These are crappy numbers to do with the $5,000 expenses. Oh, didn't think of that. So basically, if you take $10,000, you know, you get 66% of the expenses. And if your expenses are $5,000, that's $3,300. You're paying $3,300 for your expenses because you're paying 66% of the it's relational to how much money you're bringing in. So the other person is only going to make 33%. The other person is only going to pay what's that add up to, 1,700? It's going to balance out percentage wise. You don't see this problem when people share accounts, obviously, because you just put the money into a pool. All the expenses come out of this pool and you don't have to worry about it. It's shared money. But when people's accounts are separate, that's where the issue arises. And that's where financial problems can start. There's a bunch of other ways financial problems can start. Like for me and my spouse, for me and Derek, for example, Derek's a spender. 1000% he's a spender. I am not so much. I like to spend my money. I don't like to be restricted, but I save and I pay myself first. That's another principle that I teach my clients a lot, is paying yourself first. You can put that money into whatever you want, income producing assets, investments, whatever, but the money comes to me first. Not my bills, not my expenses. It comes to me first. And well, because I set it up, it funds his retirement, funds my retirement, funds the kids' education, all that kind of stuff. But us first, not our toys, us first. And if we don't have proper connection and communication, he's going to get resentful that I'm quote unquote hoarding money. And I could get resentful for him quote unquote wasting money. It's not about wasting money. It's not about hoarding. It's about the balance. And for everybody, that balance is different. But we need to make sure that the proper communications are had, that the priorities are set. You can have discretionary income to go and play with your money however you desire, but make sure your priorities are taken care of first, and make sure that those priorities are evenly distributed if your money's not all in one pot. I do have, this is something that I do talk about a lot. So, well, like I said, it's not as much as I would like. I would like more people to talk about this, but I do have actually a cheat sheet or a guide on how couples can split their money and the benefits and the pros and cons on each different way, because there's a middle ground to these two options as well. And so they can also get this. They can just go to reachforsomethingmore.com/moneyinlove, and they can get that free resource. And it lines up pros and cons. Money, it should not be emotional, although it is. Here's how we can do it. And it's just a way for them to start. Because we give these options to our clients too, be like, all right, you know what? The way you're doing it's not working. Let's make some adjustments. And every couple's going to be different. There's not one size fits all. But they need to be open and communicative together, and they need to find a way that works together so that they're not one of the statistics. So that 20 to 40% can become eventually 5 to 10%, and then eventually 0%. And divorces are only happening because of interpersonal issues. I would prefer if they never happen, but if they're going to happen for reasons other than finances, so I hope that part made sense. I know that the math on the fly there was a great practice for me to do math on the fly, but I hope that makes sense in splitting the expenses proportionate to the amount you're bringing into the relationship.
It does.
If you're separate.
And one thing that I want to practice, ideally, if I were to ever get married, was all the household expenses. You tell it what that is. Let's say, for example, it's $10,000, and everyone gives a percentage of their pay. So it's more equitable instead of being equal, right? Because equal is, to your point, 50-50. But if one person makes 10,000, the other person makes 5,000, one person has more money at the end of the day than the other person because they're being hit more. But if you look at equity, some person would pay, let's say, the 66%, another person pays 33%, but the disposable income they have is similar and it's on an even playing field. And one of the struggles that I've come in contact with helping people with their finances is that it's such a sensitive topic.
It really is.
right? Like people, even when it comes to just mentioning it to their spouse, they're kind of holding back. And some people I know, they fall into the trap of trusting strangers more so than their actual partner. So for example, um, they'll watch any and every YouTube video about finances. And they're
Mhm.
like, aha, I know more than you. And then you're like, okay, that's perfect. Knowledge is a beautiful thing. So how's that knowledge benefiting you? What do you mean, Terrain? Well, you're smarter than me. You have more knowledge than me. So in theory, you should be better off than me, right? Because what's the point of obtaining all this knowledge and bragging about it if you're still, in the dungeon of your parents' home and you don't know
If
where
you're
your
not
money's
putting it
going?
into practice, yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And that's something that I find a lot of people struggle with is that they'll turn to social media and they'll find someone that's saying something that connects to them, good, bad, or indifferent, and they think they'll know better versus sitting down and saying to someone, hey, this is my 2-year plan. This is my 5-year plan. By 60, I want to be set. I want to be gearing down because I know that I'm going to be retired in 5 years. There's some
Mhm.
people, Trinity, I'll share with you. I've asked this question. I was like, hey, you've obtained all of this. You have all the book smarts, but how is it being applicable in your life? Meaning that, are you going to look to buy a home? Are you going to go get married? Do you want to have children? Like, what does your timer look like? Well, I don't know, Train. Then what's the point? It's like it's
Yeah.
like going to the gym 10 hours a day, but you're not losing weight, so you're not getting any stronger. What's the point? Right? So
Yep.
do you help people find their end goal and to make their end goal as realistic as possible?
Absolutely. So I have some spreadsheets. I know that's such a fun word, is spreadsheets. Only people in the finance industry get excited for spreadsheets. Maybe in business if you got a really good revenue year. So I have tools that we go, okay, let's say it's a retirement goal that we're looking at. Here's your end goal for retirement. This is what you want to do. So if you want to travel every month for 1 to 3 weeks and you're only home for the other weeks, how much could that cost just in today's dollars? We're not going to talk about inflation. The tool deals with that. We don't have to worry about that complex issue. How much does that cost in today's dollars? Okay, so now we figure out how much do you want to make a month to be able to afford this lifestyle, right? We figure out what that end goal is. And a lot of the times, what people don't realize is you need $1 to $3 million, one on the very low end, if you're going to just sit at home and read secondhand books in your paid off house and your paid off car and never get a new one again. Like if you're not going to do much, then you don't need much. So it's like between $1 and $3 million is typically where somebody's retirement fund should be at retirement, about that 60, 65 years old. Obviously, the longer you wait, the less you'll need. And we back it up. We're like, all right, in order to meet this goal, we need to do this today. This is how much we need to put away for our retirement today. And then we figure out if that's affordable or not. And if it's not affordable, we look at other options. Okay, well, what can we do? And I'm not a proponent to expense cutting to the extreme, because there's only so many expenses that you can actually cut, because I mentioned it earlier, inflation, those expenses are going to rise in cost again. So you can cut it down. That's not a problem. But they're going to go back up. And if your income does not go back up, your income does not rise at the same rate that your expenses are, you're going to be negative every month just to survive. So we talk about, increasing your income. And obviously, like, we have a very specific way, like when we are bringing on, when we're expanding and we're bringing on more people, obviously we leave that option open to people. You're like, hey, we're in the highest paid industry in the world, finance. We are bringing some people on right now. If you are wanting to make the switch, we've got amazing trainings, and it's just, me personally, you couldn't pay me to go back to work for a bank and one company specifically, because I get to partner with so many different companies. So when that's happening, we leave that option open to people. But then it's also like, what could you get another job in the short term to pay off something? And then, once that thing is paid off, or once this short-term goal is reached, you can cut back and go to one job again. Is that something you're willing to do? What other thing could we do to increase your income? So we do look at some of those options, and help the clients. Now, obviously, maybe not obviously, we can't do that completely. We can help brainstorm and we can support our clients through it. Clients actually have to do the work, though. And that's where you had actually mentioned before, you wanted to be able to talk to your future potential spouse about your 2-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 5-year, 10-year plans. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when they go into any investments, whether it's real estate, cryptocurrency, or like the stock market, like any kind of investments, gold. They're long-term strategies. When people get rich fast and make a lot of money fast are the exceptions. And if we're striving to be the exceptions, we're going to be greatly disappointed. If we plan as if we're the rule, which we usually are, that's the point of being a rule. If we plan as if it's a rule where it's going to take, a level of hard work, of consistency, patience is a big one. If we plan for that patience, then great. If we're the exception, well, I've planned for it to take a heck of a lot longer. So if I become the exception, that's all the better. But I'm not falling back and losing all this time because I'm focusing on the wrong thing in the meantime. I still have a plan. I'm still committed to it. And if we're the exception, great. But there's no guarantee that you can work as hard as you want and still not be the exception. Hard work doesn't completely. If hard work meant you became rich, construction workers would be the richest people you know.